Hi, I'm Ed from Syvecs, and this week on Syvecs Says, we're talking about race fuels. Okay, so race fuels is a topic many people may have discussed. It's a topic which a lot of people do indeed talk about, but how many people have actually used it? I can talk on some first-hand experience here, directly related to Syvecs, with race fuels and the benefits and hurdles that you have to overcome in able to use them properly. So let's talk about two types of race fuels commonly available. Essentially, you've got two groups of race fuels. You have your traditional oil-based race fuels, and then you have your alcohol-based race fuels. And it's important to realise the difference between them and the effects they can have on your fuel system. Put simply, alcohol-based race fuels can eat rubber. And this is a bad thing if you have rubber fuel hoses, O-rings, washers, and anything in your fuel system that what tends to happen is it kind of swells up and starts to decompose. This can cause problems with restricting fuel flow. This can have problems with splitting lines, and then it can be a safety issue. So it's important if you're using, or if you're considering using ethanol-based or any other alcohol-based race fuel, that your fuel system is compatible with the fuel you intend to use. In the UK especially, this has been a topic of conversation recently because now our normal unleaded pump fuel is E10. And in some cases, this is enough now to cause problems with older vehicles. So then you have your other type of race fuels, the more traditional types, such as some common ones are like C16 or import. There are various brands that sell these high octane race fuels, and those are generally or pretty much always compatible with an existing fuel system on the car, but there are a few things that you need to be aware of as well. So why would you want to use race fuels? Quite a few reasons actually, but it's first useful to know the main difference between a pump grade fuel and what makes a race fuel a race fuel. One of the main things is fuel stability in a combustion event process. Race fuels are more stable. That's pretty much the key point. Under higher cylinder pressures, race fuels are more stable, less likely to knock, less likely to cause engine damage as a result, and will allow you to run, for example, more ignition timing and produce more power. Depending on what type of race fuel you have, or you decide, or you look at, it may also be oxygenated. Oxygenated fuels are great because it allows you to get more oxygen into the cylinder to produce more power without actually having to turn up boost or make any other changes to a vehicle. So they're kind of a cheat, which is obviously why in some racing circles they're banned. So let's first talk about E85 race fuel and a real world use application. So I tune a few VW air-cooled engines. These are used primarily for drag racing. They are in Beetles and some of them are even in camper vans. We found that E85 in these vehicles works extremely well for several reasons. One of them is its cooling capability. We've found cylinder head temperatures and block temperatures to be significantly lower, matching that of kind of a water-cooled engine compared to when we were running petroleum-based race fuels previously. This is great for us. It's enabled kind of head gaskets to last longer and just everything just to be happier under more extreme pressures and cylinder conditions than we would have got previously. A couple of things to be aware of with E85 and ethanol-based race fuels. They're highly oxygenated, around 35% by weight. So what does this mean? This means you need to put more of the fuel in to get the target air-fuel ratios you're looking for or require. And what this means is you're going to need much larger injectors, somewhere in the region of 40% larger than you would ordinarily use if calculating injector sizes for petrol. The other thing that's often overlooked as well is ethanol-based fuels are actually slightly thicker than petrol by around 15%. So this can also cause a problem if you've spec'd everything right but don't or haven't taken into account enough headroom for fuels that are slightly thicker. You know, if you took it to an extreme, it'd be like trying to pump oil around your fuel system using a pump. If you didn't build a pump or didn't have a pump large enough, then you might run into problems trying to maintain fuel pressure. So it's worth keeping that in mind, that you need to consider around sort of probably safe around 50% or so larger injectors. You're going to pick up power as well from this. So there are benefits in doing this. It's not just a pain because of the alcohol content or because of the injector sizes and the larger pumps and everything you're going to need, but it is a way of producing around sort of 10-12% maybe more power than you would see on the same setup using you know, traditional petrol kind of pump, of available high octane pump fuel wherever you are. So that's kind of my experience with those fuels. I'm not actually at my limit as to my experience with those yet. I feel there's more to come. It might be a case that we revisit this in the future. I would like to at some point add in some video footage of some of the examples I'm talking about if I get the opportunity. We'll see what we can do. So let's talk about traditional race fuels. So your high octane, petroleum based kind of fuels that have been around for a long time and usually purchased in kind of 20 litres in a metal container or whatever. So I've experienced with sort of 102 octane, 106, 112, I can't remember exactly off the top of my head what another one's like C16 is, but VP import, which is 120 plus. One of my favourite fuels, I have to say. I love the fact that it says plus because they can't measure it because the octane is that high. And I'm going to talk a bit about these. So some of these fuels are oxygenated as well, some more than others. It's worth keeping that in mind because any fuel which is oxygenated is going to need by way extra fuel to make use of that oxygen content that is delivered by the fuel system and injected with the fuel. In some cases you can need larger injectors than you may realise, and just as a side point, it's always good never to have an injector duty cycle over 90%. We won't come on to that too much now, we'll just keep that in mind. So let's have a real world case example. I was working on a 4G63 Evo engine, stroker, 2.3 litres, reasonable sized turbo, and we're running on one of the best UK pump fuels available, which is 99 octane. This is a race engine, it's a sprint car, and it's competitive. So with the Syvecs ECU, I'm able to see that in this instance, on this new build, that the engine is particularly sensitive on one cylinder to knock. A few things are tried, we've swapped around injectors, and we're keeping an eye on things like EGTs, and just to see whether this is inherent to that cylinder or whether it's something else we need to look at that's external, just to make sure we're not missing anything before we try experimenting with other things. So with all of these items ruled out, we decided to try a blend of fuel. In this case, it was only adding a percentage of race fuel in with the available pump fuel to see how we would get on. Immediately, wow, what a difference. The engine basically came alive. It's a brand new engine, and so we were tuning and running. It's a brand new engine, so we're at the point now we're on the dyno for power tuning, and this was the first time that it had been wound up at all. The difference between the 99 octane available pump fuel and the mix of race fuel was frankly unbelievable. And this is what can happen and what you might experience on a highly stressed turbocharged engine running lots of boost where you're limited by knock. In this instance, around 20% or so race fuel with pump fuel, and you'll understand why you might want to do that when you see the cost of some of the race fuels which are available. Transform the car and completely cured the problem. It was really interesting, and actually is a very fresh real-world example of the benefits of using high-performance race fuels. Often overlooked, it's not always about power. It's also margins of safety. And this is another reason why E85 is quite nice. I would describe E85 from a mechanical standpoint as kind of quite a soft fuel. It's fairly forgiving insofar as you're well protected against knock. It runs cooler, and from my perspective of actually having tuned such fuels using our Syvecs hardware, is that it just gives you as a tuner loads of confidence that what you're doing is going to be safe when it leaves you and it goes out onto a track. And from that point of view, it's flipping awesome. At the end of the day, if you guys are out there and if you're considering looking at this, or if you've got tuners working for you, all we want to do at the end of the day is be able to go home and relax. And we can't do that if we think something's tuned right to the edge of its life and wondering whether it's going to work when it's out and being raced. And that's where all race fuels give you that margin of safety. So this is kind of a brief overview. I like to think an introduction to a few reasons why you might consider looking at race fuels, the problems of looking at alcohol-based race fuels. A couple of points worth mentioning with all oxygenated race fuels is I have seen examples of where if the fuel is left in a fuel system for a long period of time, in a case with a metal fuel tank, the oxygen content within the fuel actually causes the metal tanks to rust. I've seen also cases of ethanol-based race fuels where by leaving the vehicle between race events, you get crystalline formations of it's a weird sort of substance, but what it can do is it's almost like the sugars of the fuel, if you like. That's how it's kind of the best way to describe it, I think, of what it looks like. And that can block fuel lines. So in almost all, and cause all sorts of oil carnage. So in almost all cases with race fuels, one of the best things you can do is to, after you've done your race meeting or whatever, drain the system down. Obviously you need a safe way to allow that to happen. You can get dry quick couplers. They're fairly expensive, but they're super awesome. And then that allows you to pump out the existing fuel that's in the car, replace it with a normal pump grade of fuel, run that through the system, and that will just keep everything fresh and clean, ready for the next time you take it out. No fuels like sitting for long periods of time, especially ethanol-based fuels. I've never seen a water content issue. You may have heard just sort of spread around that ethanol-based fuels absorb water. It's true, but in reality, personally, I've yet to see that. I think that's probably because most of the people I've worked with, they drain the systems and they keep on top of it. I have, however, seen cases of things starting to block up where that hasn't been, the kind of cleaning process hasn't been followed properly. So maybe a slightly longer video than I intended, but I hope you found this useful. If you have any specific questions relating to race fuels, feel free to ask them below. I may be able to help with my own first-hand experience. That's always the way I like doing this. I always try to ensure anything I talk about I've actually done, and it's not kind of third-hand information. So ask them below, like the page, give us a follow,